The Kansas Alliance of Wetlands and Streams is a nonprofit organization dedicated to the restoration and protection of the watersheds in the state of Kansas. Nick Schmitz learns why watersheds are so important and what work is being done to save them.
Andrew, Megan, so nice to meet you. So the Kansas Alliance for Wetlands and Streams, what is that? What is KAWS and what do you guys do?
So KAWS is a conservation nonprofit that was started in the 90s, and we're about connecting the waters and lands and people of Kansas. A big part of it is working on conservation of the quality of these aquatic resources as well as the quantity, and we work with different conservation partners to make that happen. Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks, Ducks Unlimited, Playa Lakes Joint Venture, Friends of the Caw. We all work with them in different ways to achieve these goals.
And we're watershed coordinators, so we both have degrees in some sort of environmental aspect. And so we are in specific watersheds as coordinators to work one-on-one with landowners, counties, to address water quality issues that we know exist in those areas.
We do that informed by the water quality testing that we do. So typically these major water sources like the Caw and its tributaries can tell us a lot about the land use strategies within a specific watershed.
And so across Kansas, there are 34 active watersheds. We are part of the RAPS Watershed Coordinators, which is the Watershed Restoration and Protection Strategy. Kansas loves their acronyms. So us watershed coordinators, we are in specific watersheds across the state of Kansas. And so we know what the impairment or the pollutant that's the highest priority within that watershed that we should be working on, whether it's E. coli bacteria or nutrients like phosphorus, nitrogen, atrazine. Sedimentation's a big one. So we each have our own individual goals within the watershed that we are working to address with whatever the land use is, whether it's urban, agriculture. We can work with them one-on-one to help protect water quality.
So it seemed to me that education is really key. That maybe a lot of these farmers and ranchers have never really thought about it. They're not adverse to the idea of making changes. They just has never been presented to them.
Yeah, I would say watershed conservation isn't at the forefront of people's minds when they're running their business. And so a lot of times it just takes us knocking on the door or trying to find where they're going to meet for a coffee meeting or a conservation district meeting and just presenting it to them.
They don't know what they don't know, right?
Yeah. And all of your funding comes from the EPA, is that correct?
Yeah, it's EPA funding with the Clean Water Act that gets filtered through the Kansas Department of Health and Environment and administrated there.
And how does it work with the farmer when you do a project? Do they get reimbursed? Do they put the money forward first, or do you cut them a check and then?
Typically, they pay for the project up front, and we pay on actual invoices. We do want the landowners that we work with to have a stake in the project, so there is a percentage, you could say, that they pay. Sometimes it's just their labor building it, designing it, going to get the materials. But we are able to pay for a percentage, usually the higher cost items that they otherwise wouldn't be able to afford to do the projects. Yeah, so Nick, this is Chris Campbell. He is a landowner in Northeast Kansas that we did a project with. We realized that he needed some help with his overall operation and also that we could benefit water quality with the project that we did with him.
And had you noticed some issues with the creek and with the way that your cattle were grazing?
As a producer, they're getting cows to fresh water is a problem. If it's muddy, they get mud on their udders. If they're nursing, the calves don't want to drink, you get scours. It can just snowball.
And so Megan, walk me through a little bit of how you start when you engage with a producer, with a farmer. What is it that you do, and how do you start the action?
So usually I listen to what the landowner needs. So he was having an issue with the cattle utilizing the creek as a drinking source. He wasn't very happy about that for multiple different reasons. And so we work with them to see, what does your overall land look like? How can we improve things, not only for the landowner and their overall operation, but also for the environment and specifically water quality, what we work on. And so we take that into account. Where are our other water sources? How can we get the cattle further away from the creek and still establish an operation that works for the landowner, but also benefits what we're going for?
So guys, can you walk me through exactly what was done on this land?
The cattle were all concentrated down here, drinking out of the creek, polluting it. And so by running that water line from a well up at their house all the way up this hill here, we were able to establish a water source that's further away from the creek. So when the cattle are up there drinking, and their manure and their waste is around, it is filtering. It's still going to run off in rain events, but it's filtering through that pasture and through that grass. So it's removing all of the pollutants and the impairments before it reaches the creek and the surface water and goes downstream.
And Chris, what has the result been? Have you seen a difference in how clean the creek is?
Absolutely. I mean, it cleaned up within a couple months.
So Megan, when we're looking at a creek like this, and Chris is talking about the cattle going through it and stirring up the mud and cattle waste, like, why is that posing a problem? I mean, it looks like just a small little creek.
Yes, yeah. So where we're at right now is a part of the Lower Kansas River watershed. So this little creek is a part of that whole watershed. So this is Little Stranger Creek, and this area is impaired for E. coli bacteria. So we know that there are pollutants and impairments, and we kind of have them listed in priority. This area specifically has an E. coli issue that comes directly from livestock. There's a lot of other sources, but that's what we're addressing at this location. And so Little Stranger Creek then drains into Stranger Creek proper, which is a much larger system, and Stranger Creek flows into the Kansas River, bigger river, then flows into the Missouri River, the Mississippi River, and all of those pollutants, picking up others along the way, eventually makes its way down into the Gulf of Mexico.
So if you can clean up here at the source, it helps tremendously down the line.
Yes, yeah. So just one project and fixing the pollutants that are coming off of just his field, if we can do that with multiple people down the line, we're having a greater impact.
Okay, so this is the watering system that you installed?
Yes, we have one here and one in the east pasture. It's just a frost-free, no power. You don't need electricity. It's a very simple float system. And this tube goes in the ground 7 foot, so it is kept from freezing from the ground heat.
Okay.
It's an insulated tube, and we installed a matting around it and put some gravel on top so the cattle wouldn't sink. And they just come up here and
So you're running a line from you have a private well up by the house.
Yes.
And you're running a line from there to here.
Right.
Which is feeding this. So Megan, this is a pretty easy solution to the problem. So if you got farmers all in the area to start installing these, what kind of a difference would that make?
Right. It's a huge impact. So what seems like such a simple project to do, if we look at the whole scope of it, right? We've got the creek down here behind us that's downslope, putting the cattle up here on top of the hill on a flat surface, and a relatively easy project. I didn't construct it, he did, but it's something so simple as establishing a water source that's off stream. And keeping them away from the creek. If we could do this with other farmers and ranchers in the watershed and even in a larger scale, we could have a huge impact on water quality overall.
I mean, a simple solution to what is a pretty big problem. Chris, thank you so much for letting us come on your land and
bet.
take a look.
One of the things we like to highlight is that, it's something that everybody plays a role in. We all use water every day, we all drink water every day, and we all, through our actions, whether it's in an urban setting or a rural setting, influence the quality of that downstream. When you're thinking about how much fertilizer you're putting on your lawn, where you're dumping your motor oil, or where you're washing your car, ultimately that all ends up as stormwater, and it ends up in a place like the Kansas River.
I like to look at it from the big bird's eye view, right? So what we do in one area, in a rural setting or an urban setting, all of that makes its way to the water.
A lot of these changes to make a difference with water quality are incremental, right? And a lot of times it takes kind of a generational change in the farming community, for the most part, when we can find kind of a win-win situation where we're funding a project that's going to help their operation too. It's very much an easy sell, but sometimes it's a little more difficult.
But I think as younger generations come about, people are more aware of the issues. They want to learn more about it and they want to do better. So optimism for the future, I think it looks better than it did, but we still have a long ways to go and a lot of challenges, especially when we're talking about climate change as a whole, and water just being one piece of that.